Hello everyone, Ryan here. Last night I finally saw Straight Outta Compton, and I gotta admit, I've never been a big rap fan or hip hop fan. I've always been more of a rock guy, a metalhead, rock on. But I actually enjoyed this movie, even though before I was only mildly familiar with some of the NWA's songs, mostly because I had older cousins, one older cousin in particular who she was a pretty big fan of NWA, and she would blast their music at full volume on a stereo whenever possible. So I was mildly familiar with some of their songs. But as far as their story, their origin story, and everything they experienced, I had really no idea. So I found it really interesting to see just how they started in general, and how, I like the fact that Ice Cube was the one who wrote the majority of the lyrics. That was something I didn't know prior to seeing this movie. And then also too, I didn't really know about the fact that eventually they got to a point where Ice Cube separated from the group, and that's when he started his solo career. And of course, the fact that he did it was primarily because he didn't like he was being screwed as far as, financially, business-wise, due to their manager, Jerry Halliwell, I believe, Jerry Halliwell. And so, yeah, I really like this movie. And another thing I liked that it depicted was all these different events that occurred during the early 1990s, and such as the Rodney King incident and the LA riots that shortly followed. I remember seeing that on TV, and also hearing people talk about it, because at the time I was about 9 or 10 years old, and because I was born in Pasadena, but I was raised in and around the surrounding Los Angeles area. So I remember when all of this occurred and seeing it on TV, and, of course, being a 9-year-old kid, I had no real idea of what was going on. I knew that it wasn't a good thing, but I didn't fully understand it. Actually, I would say today I don't really fully understand when something like that happens. I understand maybe some of the motives behind it, but to me, it doesn't make sense that it should have to happen at all. And it's unfortunate that events like that are still happening today. But that's a whole other topic. I could do a whole separate video on that. Maybe I will eventually. But Straight Outta Compton, it depicts all of these events really well. And even if you see it, if you're not familiar with, when you see it, and if you have no personal recollection of these events, and you see it in this movie, and it may seem as though they exaggerated on a lot of these events, such as the Rodney King incident, and others just like it. Believe me when I say they did not exaggerate. They depicted these events quite well, quite accurately. It's unfortunate they did occur, but no real exaggeration there. As far as with the origin story of NWA and all the members, I have no idea, if they exaggerated on their origin story or not. Obviously, when it comes to any kind of movie like this, you expect that certain things are going to be exaggerated or made to seem more dramatic than they actually were. And, that's just, to make sure that people are entertained and not falling asleep when they go to see it in the theaters, and which is understandable. Another thing I liked about this movie was the scene which kind of led up to right before Ice Cube wrote the lyrics for one of their popular songs called F the Police, or F-U-C-K, the Police. And they were already recording in the studio, and they took a break and they stepped outside the studio, and they were just standing on the sidewalk just talking, just talking about different song ideas and other stuff like that. And then all of a sudden these police come up to them and start harassing them and antagonizing them, and they just assume that they're these no good, low life gangbangers, and and they try to arrest them, though they don't handcuff them, but they make it clear that they want to arrest them. And then eventually their manager comes out too, the Jerry Halliwell guy, and he starts cursing at the police, telling them that they can't arrest people just based on how they look, and which he's right. So then, of course, the police, they don't arrest him, mostly because they have no reason to arrest him. So they let him go. They go back into the studio, and then that's when Ice Cube writes the lyrics for the song F the Police. They record it, and then the rest is history. Of course, it ends up becoming one of their most popular songs. And then shortly after that, they're depicted in the mainstream media as being this gangbanger group who incites violence and riots and, racial tension, and which I can see how, anybody could have interpreted their music that way. But the thing I liked also that came across was the fact that they weren't so much as, they weren't really purposefully, trying to incite anything. It was more like, they were just expressing their point of view, and it just so happened, hey, they grew up and lived in Compton for a big part of their lives. So they were used to seeing all these violent events happening around them. And for the longest time, they had no way of expressing that to people, sharing it with the world, until they started doing it through their music. And which that in itself that's nothing new. Artists, musicians, creative people in general have done that, since way before this movie, way before rap, way before even rock bands. That's what creative people do, is express themselves through their art, through their music, through their writing. And so I liked how it depicted this process. Not that I'm saying I liked the violence that they had to witness and deal with, but the way they turned that into their own means of self-expression. And so obviously eventually got to the point where they performed a concert. The police didn't want them to perform this particular song, F the Police. And they said if they performed it, then they would be arrested. And so, of course, Ice Cube immediately said, they can't tell us what to do. We have the First Amendment on our side, and we can perform any song we want to perform. And he ended up saying that pretty much, while they were performing in concert. And so they did perform the song F the Police. And so pretty much as soon as they began performing it, right away you see all these uniformed police officers, also some plainclothes detectives in the crowd. They start walking up towards the stage, towards the back part of the stage. And pretty much, I don't even think, at least in the movie, it shows they don't even really get to finish the song. Because then shortly after that, they run off the stage, and somebody in the crowd fires a gun or something like that. And they run off the stage, go backstage, and they're immediately chased by the police and eventually caught and arrested. So it's unfortunate that had to happen, but I don't know. In a case like that, I don't think, I mean, for me personally, I do believe in the freedom of expression. Obviously, some people are going to be offended a little more than others, but that's really, you can't really control that. You can't really sorry, I lost my train of thought there. You can't really control what people are going to be offended by. You just can't. It's it's a slippery slope. Either you do what people expect of you, but still offend some people, or you do what people don't expect from you, and end up offending everybody, every single person around you. So it's like, you're damned if you do, or you're damned if you don't. So in that case, I say, I would be more on the side of Ice Cube, in that case, because I'd be like, well, to hell with it, if we're going to offend people anyways, then, I'm just going to perform whatever song I want to perform. And that's what they did. And, I don't see them as being in the wrong for doing that. Now, as far as inciting violence or riots, I don't think that's fair to accuse them or just their songs of inciting violence, any kind of violence, because they're not the first musical group to be accused of that. They're definitely not the first, and they definitely won't be the last. So yeah, I mean, we've all heard before. I mean, the same thing went on way before in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, and even before that in the 40s and 30s. And it's nothing new for a musical group or a band or an artist or a creative individual to be accused of inciting violence or inciting impure thoughts. And that's nothing new. It's been done plenty of times before. So, I like that, NWA, or at least Ice Cube, he stuck to his guns on that one. So yeah, and then I also agree he was right to split from the group because he was being screwed over. It was very clear he was being screwed over. So, he had the right to leave the group and do his own thing. So, I could go on and on about this movie, and definitely, I mean, there's really nothing to spoil. The other thing I noticed too is that they crammed a lot of different things into a short amount of time. Even though the movie is over 2 hours, almost 2.5 hours, but obviously it is kind of clear that they kind of skipped over certain things, and but overall, it's a very great movie. I mean, it's got me talking for this long, so I apologize if this seems a little too lengthy, but that's the nature of reviewing stuff and just talking about creative things in general, and so I mean, on a scale of 1 tamale to 10 tamales, I give Straight Outta Compton a solid 8. In fact, I would say 8.5, definitely 8.5 out of 10. And so yeah, not only because it portrays so many of these events that occurred during the early 90s, but also because it portrays the creative process and how any one individual can express themselves at any given moment, regardless of what others think of their music, of their writing. And so yeah, in that regard, it definitely deserves 8.5 out of 10. So if you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. I have no idea when it's going to come out on DVD or Blu-ray, or because I believe it's still in the theaters. But definitely check it out if you haven't already. It's well worth the watch. So that'll do it for this review. Thanks for watching. Once again, check out my blog, lawyerreviews.wordpress.com. And don't be afraid to follow me on Twitter, twitter.com/lawyerreviews. And if there's a movie you think I should review or you want me to check out, don't be afraid to leave me a comment and just say, hey, Ryan, maybe you could watch this movie, or hey, maybe you could review this movie. And then I'll look into it. If I'm able to, I'll do that, watch it and review it. So definitely consider doing that. So until next time, keep it real and peace.